The bat signal, one of Gotham's most iconic symbols, has long been associated with the call for help, an emergency beacon summoning Gotham's dark protector, Batman. However, what if this familiar image, the flash of a bright, blinding symbol cutting through the darkness of Gotham's sky, was not simply an emergency signal at all? What if it was, in fact, a psychological manipulation, a carefully orchestrated tool used to control the populace, reinforce fear, and perpetuate Batman's very image as Gotham's sole protector, essentially creating a dependent and docile society? The bat signal, in this light, could be seen not as a symbol of hope, but as a tool of fear, carefully crafted to manipulate the citizens of Gotham into believing in a savior they could not see, whose very presence was imposed upon them through a signal designed to reinforce their helplessness. This theory shifts the perspective from Batman as a lone hero answering the call of Gotham's desperate cries, to the reality of Gotham's reliance on an artificial savior, a psychological construct built on fear and dependence. At its core, the bat signal is a device designed to invoke a specific reaction, a conditioned response triggered by the very presence of the signal. To understand the true nature of the bat signal, one must look at the psychology behind its design. The bat signal is not a tool that represents a call for help from a Gotham that needs saving. Rather, it functions as a psychological cue embedded in the fabric of Gotham's consciousness. The moment the spotlight breaks through the dark sky, it triggers something primal in the citizens of Gotham, from their hope to their fear, creating a link between the symbol and a collective response to perceived danger. The public's reaction is not just one of relief, but a conditioned reflex, cultivated over time, that associates the bat signal with safety and order. However, this perceived order is not truly one of justice, but one shaped by Batman's presence as a constant enforcer of control, reinforcing the idea that Gotham cannot exist without him, that the city cannot stand on its own without Batman's guiding hand, both in the form of his vigilantism and his omnipresent symbol in the sky. In truth, Gotham has become a city that has been psychologically engineered to expect Batman's intervention, and thus, the bat signal is not just a call for help, but a signal that reaffirms Gotham's dependency on the constant threat of crime and violence. The idea of Gotham's dependency on the bat signal opens the door to understanding the manipulation of hope as a psychological tool. When Gotham's citizens see the bat signal, their minds are immediately flooded with anticipation, the hope that Batman will save them from whatever criminal or disastrous event is looming. However, this hope is not rooted in a true proactive approach to safety, but rather a reactive and passive reliance on Batman as a savior. The mere presence of the bat signal creates the illusion of protection even before Batman's arrival. This psychological technique is akin to learned helplessness, a phenomenon where people begin to believe they cannot control their environment and thus turn to an external force, in this case Batman, to rescue them from danger. The bat signal represents the externalization of Gotham's control over its own fate, shifting the responsibility of governance, order, and even justice to one individual. Gotham, therefore, is not empowered to make real change. It is empowered only by the illusion of change that Batman brings, a change that can only occur when the signal is flashed, reinforcing Gotham's helplessness and dependency. Furthermore, the psychological manipulation of the bat signal extends to the criminals of Gotham. The bat signal, often seen by the public as a sign of hope, has a very different effect on Gotham's criminals, invoking fear and dread. The signal is, for them, a constant reminder that their activities are under surveillance, that no crime is safe, and that Batman is always watching. This psychological warfare enforces Batman's dominance over Gotham's criminal underworld, not by direct force, but by creating a palpable sense of paranoia. The mere idea of Batman is enough to deter many criminals, but it is the bat signal that solidifies his presence as a constant, looming threat. This effect is psychological in nature. While the criminals of Gotham know that Batman cannot be everywhere, the symbol of the bat signal keeps them on edge, never knowing when or where Batman might appear. It is not just about the immediate consequences of their actions, but the mental toll of always feeling watched, always feeling that they are in the presence of a force they cannot control. The bat signal, therefore, serves as an instrument of fear that manipulates the actions of Gotham's criminals, much in the same way that it manipulates the minds of Gotham's citizens, reinforcing the idea that Batman is the one and only force capable of enforcing order in the city, thus making any alternative method of justice or reform seem futile or secondary to the overwhelming presence of Batman's influence. Additionally, it is important to consider how police officers and law enforcement in Gotham are also psychologically influenced by the bat signal. Over time, the Gotham City Police Department, GCPD, has come to view Batman not just as an ally, but as a necessary counterpart in their fight against crime. Its relationship, though complex, is an extension of the same psychological manipulation that the bat signal creates in Gotham's citizens. The signal is a reliance, a tool that reinforces the status quo. The GCPD, though an institution that exists to enforce the law, has become partially dependent on Batman's intervention, symbolized by the bat signal, to handle the more extreme criminal elements in Gotham. Instead of addressing the root causes of crime or taking proactive action, the GCPD often finds itself reacting to the bat signal, waiting for Batman to solve the problems that it cannot. This dynamic fosters a false sense of security, where Gotham's law enforcement believes that they do not need to address the deeper issues within the city's criminal justice system because Batman will step in when necessary. The bat signal thus perpetuates the cycle of dependency, not just for the citizens and criminals of Gotham, but for the very institution meant to protect them. The mental toll on the GCPD is significant, as it reinforces their position as secondary players in the enforcement of justice, unable to function without the constant reminder of Batman's watchful eye. As we examine these layers of manipulation, it becomes evident that the bat signal is not just a tool of justice, but a carefully crafted psychological device used to enforce a system of fear, control, and dependency. The light of the bat signal is not just an invitation for Batman to intervene in Gotham's darkest moments. It is an instrument of social control, keeping the citizens, criminals, and law enforcement in a constant state of anticipation and fear. It is a manipulation that ensures Gotham remains reliant on Batman, incapable of finding true justice or self-sufficiency without his constant presence. The true power of the bat signal lies not in its ability to summon Batman, but in its ability to shape the minds of those who see it, turning Gotham into a city where hope and fear are no longer independent forces, but are interwoven into a psychological tapestry that keeps the city trapped in a cycle of dependence and insecurity. The bat signal's ability to condition behavior is rooted in classical conditioning, a psychological phenomenon first discovered by Ivan Pavlov. Pavlov's famous experiment with dogs showed how repeated associations between a neutral stimulus, such as a bell, and a natural response, such as salivation at the sight of food, could eventually cause the neutral stimulus to trigger that response by itself. Similarly, Gotham's citizens, through the repetition of the bat signal's appearance, have learned to associate the light in the sky with security and salvation. Every time the signal flashes, it is followed by Batman's arrival to restore order, punish criminals, and protect the city from chaos. Over time, the bat signal itself becomes a conditioned stimulus, a trigger that causes the population to respond with hope and anticipation, often without fully understanding the psychological mechanisms at play. It is no longer just a tool to signal Batman's arrival. It has become a symbol of instant relief, an automatic reaction for Gotham's populace to look towards the sky, expecting salvation. In this sense, the bat signal is not just a beacon of hope. It's an instrument of behavioral control. Gotham citizens do not necessarily need to understand the complexities of the world they live in or the inherent flaws of the justice system. What they have come to know, what has been ingrained in their psyche, is that when the bat signal appears, Batman will act, ensuring that the chaos that pervades their city is momentarily suppressed. However, this conditioning also means that Gotham citizens are led to believe that the only path to safety and security is through Batman's intervention. Self-reliance is undermined, and the population grows to see Batman as their sole protector. This created dependency extends beyond just hope and safety. It shapes how Gotham's residents interact with a system of authority in general. Over time, the bat signal creates an environment where individuals are mentally trained to wait for intervention, to expect that someone will come to save them rather than trying to solve problems themselves. The result is a society that subconsciously believes they are incapable of taking control of their own futures. This dynamic perpetuates the status quo. As long as the bat signal shines, Gotham's problems are someone else's responsibility. It removes the agency of the people, leaving them reliant on Batman's timely intervention rather than motivating them to pursue longer-term solutions that address the root causes of Gotham's criminality and corruption. This phenomenon leads to a passive populace, one that expects action from Batman, never realizing that their dependence on this external force stunts their own ability to address the deeper institutional failings of their society. While the bat signal psychologically conditions Gotham's citizens, it also has a profound impact on Gotham's criminal underworld. The bat signal triggers a sense of paranoia and fear among the criminals who operate within the city. Similar to how Pavlov's dogs learned to associate the bell with food, Gotham's criminals have been conditioned to associate the bat signal with an impending threat to their operations. For them, the flash of light in the sky is a reminder that Batman is watching, that they are under constant surveillance, and that their time to continue their illegal activities is always limited. The effect of the bat signal on Gotham's criminal population is not unlike the way that psychological deterrents, such as the threat of arrest or punishment, work in society. The mere knowledge that the bat signal is shining prompts immediate changes in behavior, with criminals going into hiding, changing their plans, or even ceasing their activities entirely for fear of Batman's swift intervention. This fear, however, is not limited to just the active criminals in Gotham. The bat signal also influences potential criminals, those who might have been on the verge of breaking the law but decide against it due to the looming presence of Batman. The bat signal creates an environment where criminals are constantly aware that their every move is being watched, even if Batman is not physically present. This psychological deterrence plays a pivotal role in controlling crime. Even if Batman is not actively intervening, the mere possibility of his arrival, represented by the bat signal in the sky, acts as a constant reminder to Gotham's criminals that they are never truly in control of their surroundings. In this way, the bat signal serves as a powerful control mechanism within the city, operating like a behavioral cue that drives Gotham's criminals to act in ways that are beneficial to Batman's objectives. However, this psychological effect also traps Gotham's criminal element in a cycle of reactionary behavior. Criminals, conditioned by the bat signal, become increasingly erratic and unpredictable, knowing that at any moment their plans can be thwarted. This creates a sense of madness and chaos among Gotham's underworld, which in turn feeds into Batman's own psychological torment. Gotham's criminals, aware that Batman is ever present, react against the symbol in ways that perpetuate their own self-destruction, while Batman's existence as a symbol ensures that they can never escape this cycle of fear. What is even more fascinating is the relationship between the GCPD and the bat signal. In the beginning, the bat signal was merely a call for Batman to act as a support figure to the police force, who were often overwhelmed by Gotham's more dangerous criminals. However, over time, Gotham's police officers, particularly Commissioner Gordon, began to rely on the bat signal more heavily, not just as a tool for Batman's intervention, but as a visual representation of their own failure. The GCPD's reliance on Batman becomes a psychological crutch, a way for the police to absolve themselves of the responsibility to solve Gotham's problems. By consistently calling for Batman's help, the police themselves become psychologically detached from the solutions required to address Gotham's underlying criminal issues. They become conditioned to view Batman as the ultimate problem solver, thus weakening their own agency. Gotham's law enforcement becomes psychologically dependent on Batman's presence and in many cases may feel incompetent without him. This in turn leads to a systemic reliance on Batman, reinforcing the idea that Gotham cannot function or thrive without him. The GCPD, perhaps unknowingly, also plays a significant role in reinforcing the psychological manipulation of Gotham's citizens. As the police force continues to cooperate with Batman, Gotham's residents begin to perceive their city as a place that cannot protect itself, one that requires an external force to maintain order. The bat signal thus becomes a symbol of Gotham's collective dependence, signaling not just the need for Batman, but also the weakness of the institutions that should otherwise be able to protect Gotham's people. The more the GCPD relies on Batman, the more emotionally and mentally disengaged the citizens of Gotham become from the real causes of crime in their city. They are conditioned to accept Batman as the primary guardian of Gotham, disconnecting themselves from the need to demand systemic change or the evolution of a law enforcement system capable of standing on its own. The bat signal's influence on Gotham's societal dynamics is profound, as it not only shapes individual behavior, but also alters the collective psychology of the entire city. At a fundamental level, the bat signal embodies a shift in responsibility from the institutions of law and governance to the individual figure of Batman. Gotham's citizens, conditioned by years of seeing the bat signal light up the sky, come to expect Batman's intervention whenever the city is in crisis. The presence of the signal perpetuates the illusion of a safe Gotham, where crime and chaos are swiftly dealt with by one individual. However, this creates an environment where personal agency is minimized, and the city's population becomes increasingly passive, believing that their well-being depends solely on Batman's decisions and actions. This reliance on Batman, facilitated by the bat signal, undermines the development of a collective civic responsibility in Gotham. The people are no longer motivated to engage with the root causes of Gotham's problems, such as corruption, inequality, or the lack of resources, because they are taught, subconsciously, that Batman will handle it. In this way, Gotham becomes a city of perpetual dependence, where citizens fail to engage with or take responsibility for the systemic issues at play. The signal, flashing across the sky, acts as a constant reminder that Gotham is in a state of perpetual crisis and that its inhabitants are powerless to change their circumstances. This creates a cycle where Gotham's true problems remain unresolved, while the bat signal continues to serve as a symbolic band-aid that temporarily quells public anxiety. Gotham, though technically safer at times, becomes a city increasingly disconnected from reality, where people feel unable to change their own fate and instead rely on the intervention of an outsider, a vigilante. As Gotham's collective psyche shifts toward passivity, a larger existential dilemma emerges. What does it mean to be a hero in a city that has come to depend on external intervention? Batman's role as a protector of Gotham is marked by a fundamental moral paradox. He is both the savior and the one who perpetuates the idea that Gotham needs saving. The bat signal serves as a reminder of Batman's moral absolutism, where his form of justice is seen as the only solution to the city's problems. Yet, this intervention, while aimed at restoring order, raises the question, is it truly justice if the system is reliant on a single individual's power and decisions? Justice, in its truest sense, should be collective, based on a system of law, order, and cooperation among citizens. But the bat signal, as a symbol of Batman's dominance, erodes this foundational principle by creating a hierarchy of power where Batman stands alone at the top. The more Gotham comes to rely on Batman, the more the concept of justice becomes tied to his personal code, a code that is not beholden to the rule of law or democratic principles, but to the whims of one individual's perception of right and wrong. Batman's justice is, therefore, not an objective standard but a subjective moral framework that becomes increasingly impervious to oversight. The bat signal, as an instrument of control, reinforces this framework by distracting Gotham from the need for a functioning, self-sustaining legal system. The moral implications of the bat signal are not just theoretical, they are felt on the streets of Gotham. While Batman's actions may result in the defeat of individual criminals and the temporary restoration of order, they come at the cost of undermining the rule of law and the empowerment of Gotham's citizens. Batman's vigilante justice often bypasses due process, relying instead on intimidation, fear, and physical force. This approach, while effective in the short term, fosters an environment where personal retribution is viewed as acceptable and even necessary. Gotham, in essence, becomes a city where justice is served not by the system but by one man who operates outside the law. The more Gotham comes to accept the bat signal as a symbol of hope, the less it challenges the very idea that the rule of law can be administered fairly and impartially. Instead, Gotham begins to internalize the notion that justice is something that can be demanded and enforced by a single powerful figure rather than a complex collaborative process of checks and balances. This manipulation of justice embodied by the bat signal transforms Gotham into a city of moral contradiction, where the lines between right and wrong, lawful and unlawful, become increasingly blurred. Another critical aspect of the bat signal's influence is its role in reinforcing fear as a governing tool. The bat signal is not just a symbol of justice for the citizens of Gotham. It is a reminder of the constant threat of chaos and crime that pervades the city. When the signal lights up the sky, Gotham's citizens are reminded of the inherent instability of their world and their reliance on Batman to restore order. This creates a psychological state of anxiety, where Gotham's population is never truly at ease. Fear becomes the primary motivator for both the public and the criminals, and the bat signal serves as a tool to manage this fear. For Gotham's criminals, the signal represents imminent punishment, a reminder that no crime goes unpunished under Batman's watch. The fear of the bat signal causes criminals to operate in a state of constant paranoia, altering their behavior and making them more erratic and unpredictable. Meanwhile, for the citizens, the bat signal represents the promise of safety, but it also serves as a constant reminder of Gotham's inability to protect itself without Batman's intervention. The signal is thus a double-edged sword. It provides hope, but also keeps the city in a state of perpetual fear. Gotham is never allowed to forget that it is a fragile society, always on the brink of collapse without the intervention of its dark guardian. The bat signal in this way operates as a symbol of control, a way of managing both hope and fear while maintaining the status quo of dependency and uncertainty. This dual function of the bat signal, as both a symbol of hope and a tool of psychological manipulation, also extends to how Batman himself is perceived by both the citizens and the criminals of Gotham. The bat signal reinforces Batman's image as an all-powerful, omnipresent force, casting him as the ultimate arbiter of justice. Batman's persona, built on the foundation of fear, is projected onto Gotham through the bat signal, solidifying his place as a figure who cannot be questioned or challenged. The bat signal, flashing in the sky, serves as a constant reminder that Batman is the ultimate protector, a figure whose moral authority cannot be disputed. This psychological projection has its consequences. As Gotham's criminals grow increasingly fearful of Batman's presence, they are forced to act within his framework, working around the influence of the bat signal, which tells them when to avoid, hide, or plan accordingly. Meanwhile, Gotham's citizens begin to internalize the idea that Batman's presence is necessary, not just for their safety, but for the very fabric of their society. In this way, the bat signal becomes a tool of moral enforcement, dictating the behavior of both the law-abiding citizens and the criminals of Gotham. The psychological hold that the bat signal has on Gotham ensures that Batman remains an undisputed figure of power, one who controls not only the criminal underworld, but also the very concept of justice in the city. The long-term effects of the bat signal's presence in Gotham are insidious and far-reaching. Over the years, the signal has become a permanent fixture in the city's identity, a symbol of both hope and fear. For the generations who grow up under its glow, the bat signal becomes more than just a light in the sky. It represents the conditioned belief that Gotham is inherently incapable of taking care of itself. Gotham's citizens and leaders come to view the bat signal as a necessary part of the city's existence, an integral aspect of their worldview that cannot be challenged. This dependency breeds a psychological environment where individual responsibility and community action are seen as secondary to Batman's intervention. As the years pass, more and more of Gotham's population grows up in the shadow of the bat signal, never learning how to actively engage with their society or work towards solutions to Gotham's systemic problems. This reliance on Batman's presence perpetuates a cycle of passivity. Gotham citizens begin to see their role in the city's well-being as limited to merely waiting for Batman to act. This creates a generation that is psychologically conditioned to expect external solutions rather than internal ones. The bat signal effectively disengages the populace from the real work of governance and self-improvement, making them more likely to passively accept the status quo of crime, corruption, and social decay. In a society where the bat signal is regularly projected into the sky, change becomes something that is always external, something that happens only when Batman decides it is time to intervene. This creates an existential paradox, where the hope for progress is consistently tied to Batman's actions, making the people of Gotham psychologically incapable of imagining a future in which they do not need him. For the younger generations, who have grown up with the bat signal as a fixture in their lives, this mental conditioning becomes ingrained at a deep level. They learn that Batman is the answer to all of Gotham's problems, and that any initiative to fix Gotham's systemic issues can be delegated to him. The idea of self-sufficiency is slowly eroded, and Gotham's citizens start to believe that outside intervention is the only way to solve their problems. This culture of dependence grows into a pervasive attitude where individuals no longer seek to fix the broken systems in their own community. Rather, they look to Batman, just as they've been taught to do, to fix what is broken. Political leadership, law enforcement, and even the citizens themselves become psychologically reliant on the signal as a reassurance that the city will always be safe under Batman's watch. However, this reliance has a significant downside. It prevents Gotham from evolving into a self-sustaining society. The bat signal, as a symbol of external force and power, discourages collective action among the populace. True community building, where citizens work together to address the root causes of crime and corruption, never takes place. Instead, Gotham citizens passively wait for Batman's intervention, and the long-term impact is a city stuck in stagnation. The mental framework created by the bat signal discourages creative problem-solving, as the solution is always presented as an outside force, someone who will swoop in to save the day. Moreover, the psychological dependency created by the bat signal harms Gotham's future leaders. By reinforcing the belief that Batman is the only one capable of fixing Gotham's problems, the signal cultivates a generation of leaders who are inadequately prepared to deal with the city's issues. Political figures, law enforcement officers, and social reformers who grew up in the shadow of Batman's mythos may find themselves incapable of taking the reins when it comes to real systemic reform. The very idea of self-governance in Gotham is diminished because it becomes tied to the figure of Batman, a figure who is outside the system and above reproach. When Gotham's leaders, both past and future, view Batman as the ultimate solution, it creates a city where true justice cannot exist without Batman's intervention. This phenomenon is evident not only in Gotham's political structure, but in its education system as well. The bat signal serves as a subtle psychological lesson in passivity for the younger generation. Schools, social systems, and even media outlets all reinforce the idea that Gotham is a city that cannot govern itself, that its problems are too vast and deep to be solved without an external force. The bat signal serves as a symbol of this mindset, reinforcing the idea that Gotham's issues are too great for individual action or systemic change. Young people grow up believing that reform and change are impossible without a dark hero to swoop in and enforce it. The narrative of Gotham's helplessness becomes ingrained in the collective unconscious, creating a city that cannot escape its own cycle of dependence and psychological paralysis. Ultimately, the psychological manipulation of the bat signal is self-perpetuating. The more it is used, the more entrenched it becomes in the collective psyche of Gotham's residents. Over time, the people of Gotham forget what it's like to feel empowered in their own ability to change their city. The bat signal, a light in the sky, becomes a symbol not just of Batman but of Gotham's perpetual dependence on him and his psychological presence. It becomes a reminder that without Batman, Gotham would fall into chaos, and that its citizens, unable to effect change on their own, must rely on him to restore order. The bat signal's long-term effects are, therefore, much deeper than a mere tool for summoning Batman. It is a force that shapes not only the behavior of Gotham's criminals and law enforcement, but the very psyche of the city's citizens. Over time, Gotham is rendered psychologically incapable of standing on its own 2 feet, trapped in a cycle of fear, dependence, and manipulation. The bat signal, designed to summon hope, ultimately becomes the symbol of a city's deepest psychological flaw, the inability to believe in its own ability to govern, reform, and evolve. The bat signal's influence goes beyond its immediate function as a tool for summoning Batman to action. Over time, it has become deeply embedded in the symbolism of Batman, strengthening the very mythos surrounding his persona. Batman, as a figure of justice, is not just a man. He is a symbol of something greater, a force that can restore order to a chaotic and corrupt city. The bat signal, by being associated with Batman's identity, elevates him from a mere vigilante to an almost mythological figure. Each time the signal illuminates the sky, it reinforces the idea that Batman is Gotham's savior, an unapproachable, larger-than-life figure who is ever present in the city's subconscious. The symbolic power of the bat signal operates much like the light of a beacon, drawing people's attention not only to Batman's presence, but to the very idea that Gotham cannot function without him. Gotham's citizens, conditioned by years of this spectacle, grow to believe that the bat signal is a necessary part of the city's survival. This belief in the necessity of Batman becomes self-perpetuating, as Gotham's citizens begin to see him as the final arbiter of justice, a figure that can act outside the law to impose order, even when the law has failed. The psychological effect of the bat signal is particularly significant in terms of how Batman's identity is reinforced. The signal is not just a call to action, it is a reminder of his power, the power to act, to judge, and to intervene in ways that transcend ordinary law enforcement. Every time the signal appears, it is not merely a prompt for Batman to take action. It is a reminder that he is the only one capable of making the tough calls that others are not willing to make. The more the bat signal is used, the more it solidifies Batman's role as the city's ultimate protector. This creates a dynamic where Batman's identity is intertwined with his ability to respond to the signal. The bat signal, in essence, becomes a reinforcement of his mythos, casting him as an ever-present figure in Gotham who can never be surpassed or replaced. It also shapes the public's understanding of justice as something that is handed down by an individual rather than by collective institutions. Batman's personal code of justice becomes the defining standard, overshadowing any attempts at reforming the justice system or building a more comprehensive approach to addressing crime. Gotham becomes a city where Batman is both the problem and the solution, a self-sustaining loop that keeps him at the center of the city's identity. However, the relationship between Batman and the bat signal is not without its complications. While the signal strengthens Batman's symbolic power, it also reinforces his isolation. Batman's reliance on the bat signal to summon him represents an external cue for action, one that indirectly implies that Batman's mission is driven by external forces rather than internal motivation. This external dependency creates a psychological paradox for Batman. On one hand, he is empowered by the symbol, using it to maintain his identity as Gotham's protector. On the other hand, he becomes increasingly reliant on the signal to guide his actions, which might limit his personal autonomy. Rather than engaging in self-directed action, Batman is effectively responding to Gotham's call, perpetuating the cycle of dependency. This reliance on the bat signal creates a tension in Batman's character. He is constantly reacting to the needs of the city rather than taking proactive steps to reshape Gotham's institutions or address the systemic issues that lead to crime in the first place. Furthermore, Batman's connection to the bat signal raises the question of whether his true self is ever fully realized outside the confines of the bat signal. Batman, despite his persona as a brooding figure of justice, is constantly defined by his external interactions, Whether it's answering the bat signal or engaging with Gotham's criminals, his identity is always in flux, shaped by external forces rather than his own internal will. This leaves Batman in a state of perpetual conflict between his desire for control and the reality that he is constantly responding to the demands placed upon him. He is, in many ways, a symbol of external expectations, unable to move beyond the role that Gotham has given him. This dynamic makes it difficult for Batman to break free from the cycle of dependency that the bat signal perpetuates. The signal itself, as a psychological tool, keeps Batman trapped in a role that he cannot escape, even if he wanted to. His identity is not just formed by his actions, but by the expectations of those around him who view him as their savior. This dynamic also extends to Batman's psychological evolution. Batman, as a character, is often depicted as someone who is constantly changing, evolving from a driven, vengeful vigilante into a more measured, philosophical figure who seeks redemption and resolution. However, the bat signal creates a situation where Batman's evolution is never truly realized. Each time the signal appears, it forces Batman to revisit his role in Gotham's struggles. He cannot move beyond the bat signal's call because it represents his indispensability. It reinforces his entrapment in the role that Gotham has assigned him. This creates a tension between Batman's desire for growth and his reliance on the signal, as his very identity becomes tied to the expectation of intervention. The bat signal, in essence, is not just a call for help. It is a symbol of Batman's stagnation, a reminder that despite his personal growth, Batman remains bound by the needs of the city and the very system that he is trying to improve. The bat signal, in its most primal form, is a tool designed to instill fear, but not just in the criminals of Gotham. Its effects ripple out into the broader psyche of the city, creating a culture of fear that reinforces Batman's symbolic dominance over both the criminal underworld and the general populace. While Batman himself is often portrayed as a figure who brings hope, the bat signal simultaneously enforces a state of dependence and constant vigilance. In this sense, Gotham's citizens, though reassured by the presence of Batman, are also psychologically controlled by the very symbol that represents their protector. The bat signal's appearance in the sky creates an environment where Gotham is constantly on edge, unsure of when the next crisis will strike, and relying on Batman to restore order. In this way, the bat signal is not just a signal of hope, it is a constant reminder of Gotham's inability to survive on its own, feeding into a sense of helplessness among the population. This manipulation of fear is, of course, deliberate. Batman's use of fear as a tool is one of his defining characteristics, and the bat signal is an extension of that tactic. Gotham's criminals are, of course, the most immediate victims of this fear. The signal calls to them as a warning that Batman is watching, creating a constant state of anxiety and paranoia within the criminal community. The idea that Batman's vigilance is ever present, even when he is not physically there, plays on the psychological principle of anticipated punishment. Criminals, like anyone who lives under constant surveillance, are forced to adapt their behavior, acting more erratically or cautiously for fear of the unpredictable response that could follow the bat signal's activation. This heightened psychological pressure pushes criminals into a constant state of reaction, always worried that Batman's looming figure might strike at any moment. This creates an environment where Gotham's criminals are mentally shackled by Batman's presence, reinforcing his control over the city's underworld. However, the psychological toll of the bat signal extends far beyond just the criminals of Gotham. The general population, while often perceiving the bat signal as a symbol of safety, also becomes subjected to its psychological influence. By creating a city that requires Batman to restore order, the bat signal fosters a culture of dependency where Gotham's citizens are consistently reminded that they cannot protect themselves. This reliance on Batman as the city's primary enforcer of justice encourages a sense of learned helplessness, where individuals grow to believe that their fates are inextricably tied to Batman's interventions. When citizens look to the sky and see the bat signal shining, they are not just seeing a light calling for Batman, they are seeing the confirmation of their own powerlessness. Gotham is a city that through years of psychological conditioning begins to believe that its safety and survival depend entirely on the unpredictable actions of a single figure, a figure who operates outside the law, in the shadows with no accountability. This culture of fear and dependence also creates an environment where Gotham's governmental institutions, the police, the judiciary, and the political system become increasingly ineffective and detached from the city's actual needs. The bat signal, by symbolizing Batman's dominance, shifts public faith away from the legal system and places it squarely in Batman's hands. Gotham's law enforcement, though well-intentioned, becomes complicit in this dynamic, as they rely on Batman to handle the more dangerous criminal elements that they cannot control. The bat signal, while initially meant to signal Batman's aid during moments of crisis, eventually becomes a tool that reinforces Gotham's systemic flaws. The more Gotham depends on Batman to enforce justice, the less the city's institutions are empowered to function on their own. Citizens begin to perceive the law as secondary to the myth of Batman, and the police come to rely on Batman as the one who does the dirty work that they cannot handle. This dynamic creates a feedback loop in which Batman's symbolic presence keeps Gotham from developing its own resilient systems for justice and order. While fear and dependence serve as tools of control for Gotham's leadership, they also play into the existential struggle of the city itself. The bat signal, a seemingly simple beacon of hope, is in fact a symbol of Gotham's failure. Gotham, as a society, is incapable of self-sustaining justice or protection. It relies on Batman's constant intervention to maintain order, yet in doing so, it remains a city that cannot move beyond the crisis. This creates a city that, though it may have moments of relative safety, is perpetually teetering on the edge of collapse, where the illusion of safety provided by Batman's presence only serves to mask the underlying instability that is inherent to the system. Gotham has built. This instability, reinforced by the bat signal, cements Batman's role as the ultimate arbiter of justice, a role that seems irreplaceable. Gotham becomes psychologically addicted to the idea of Batman, seeing him as the only means of salvation in a city that cannot provide for itself. This addiction to Batman is dangerous, as it prevents Gotham from realizing that the only true way to solve its issues is through institutional reform, community empowerment, and collective action. The bat signal serves as a constant reminder that Gotham cannot evolve beyond its reliance on an external force. The people of Gotham may look to the sky for hope, but they are not building the systems of hope themselves. Instead, they wait, trapped in a cycle of dependency that prevents true progress. What is more dangerous about the bat signal's role in perpetuating this fear and control is its mythological status. Over time, Batman becomes not just a figure of justice, but a legend. The bat signal, as the emblem of his arrival, is woven into the very fabric of Gotham's collective consciousness. It becomes more than just a tool. It becomes a religious icon, a beacon of salvation that symbolizes Batman's divine authority in the city. This psychological transformation of the bat signal into something more than human elevates Batman to a level where his actions, though often violent and outside the law, are seen as unquestionable. Gotham's citizens, conditioned by years of intervention, accept Batman's authority without fully understanding the moral cost of his vigilantism. This myth-making also serves to maintain the cycle of fear. As Batman's symbol grows, so too does the perception that no one else can protect Gotham. The idea of Batman as a singular hero creates the illusion of justice, but in reality, it prevents Gotham from ever truly confronting the flaws in its system. By constantly looking to Batman as their savior, the citizens of Gotham lose their agency, and the city becomes locked in a perpetual cycle of fear and dependence. The bat signal, which was once a call for help, becomes a symbol of Gotham's unwillingness to confront the real issues that it faces. The bat signal, as a symbol of Batman's power and intervention, plays a pivotal role in maintaining the ongoing cycle of crime and punishment in Gotham. Its flashing light across the sky not only signals Batman's readiness to restore order, but also marks the continuation of an unstoppable loop, one where crime rises, Batman responds, and the cycle repeats itself. The presence of the bat signal doesn't signify an end to Gotham's criminality, rather it reinforces it. By responding to the signal, Batman is constantly engaging with the symptoms of Gotham's deeper issues, but never addressing the root causes that allow crime to flourish in the first place. Gotham's criminal ecosystem is fundamentally based on the idea of conflict. It thrives because it is constantly challenged, whether by the GCPD or Batman himself. The bat signal, in this sense, is not just a call for help, it is a reaffirmation of Gotham's ongoing struggle, a struggle that, despite Batman's best efforts, never truly ends. This creates a feedback loop, where Batman's interventions, while well-intentioned, often end up reproducing the very conditions that allow crime to thrive. When Batman defeats one criminal, another inevitably takes their place. This cycle of constant escalation is mirrored in the ever-present need for the bat signal. Batman's war on crime is fundamentally a reactionary one. He waits for crime to occur and then steps in to contain it. He may arrest one villain or foil a criminal plot, but his actions only delay the inevitable return of Gotham's chaos. As a result, the bat signal becomes not a symbol of justice, but a constant reminder that the city is in perpetual crisis. Gotham's reliance on Batman, symbolized by the bat signal, only perpetuates the dependency cycle, where crime is never solved, only temporarily suppressed. Furthermore, the bat signal creates a paradox of control. Batman's presence is seen as an act of justice, but it is also an act of control. By constantly responding to crime, Batman reinforces his role as the only solution to Gotham's systemic issues. This effectively disempowers Gotham's institutions, from the police force to the legal system, by suggesting that only Batman's intervention can save the city. This cycle of dependence works not only to keep the criminals on edge, but also to reinforce the institutional paralysis in Gotham. The more Batman intervenes, the less Gotham is able to take control of its own destiny. The bat signal, in this respect, maintains a power structure where the growing corruption within Gotham's systems of law enforcement and governance is ignored in favor of a singular solution: Batman's intervention. It fosters an environment where reform is unnecessary because Gotham's problems are solved, temporarily, by an external force. This illusion of justice, symbolized by the bat signal, prevents Gotham from ever truly facing its systemic flaws. From the criminal perspective, the bat signal has an equally perverse effect. It creates a cycle of escalation where Gotham's villains respond to Batman not just with fear, but with a sense of challenge. The criminal psyche in Gotham becomes conditioned to Batman's presence, often rising to meet the challenge that the bat signal represents. Villains like the Joker, the Riddler, and Two-Face thrive on the constant game of cat and mouse they play with Batman. The bat signal, rather than being a tool of justice, becomes a signal of opportunity for Gotham's criminals. It signals that Batman is near, and with Batman's presence comes the chance for Gotham's villains to test their limits, escalate their actions, and prove that they can outsmart or overpower the very force that seeks to stop them. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle where Batman's interventions actually fuel the creativity of Gotham's most dangerous criminals. They know that every action they take is merely part of the larger, never-ending drama in which Batman plays his role as the eternal adversary. The bat signal, for them, is not a sign of impending defeat, but a signal for escalation, encouraging them to devise increasingly complex and destructive schemes. Gotham's criminals grow to rely on the bat signal as a trigger for their most audacious plots, knowing that Batman's response will fuel their involvement in the city's endless struggle. This creates a scenario where the criminal world and Batman's mission become increasingly intertwined. Rather than Batman's intervention leading to long-term improvement in the city, it creates an environment where Gotham's villains become more and more innovative, and the crimes they commit become more destructive. Each appearance of the bat signal feeds into the escalation of crime, pushing the city further into chaos and uncertainty. Rather than reducing crime through consistent policing and proactive reform, the bat signal's flashing light becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Every time the bat signal lights up, it signifies that Gotham is not improving, but instead sliding further into darkness. Moreover, Gotham's general population is also caught in the cycle of fear and anticipation that the bat signal generates. The symbol creates a constant tension between hope and fear, reinforcing the idea that Gotham cannot function without Batman's presence. Gotham's citizens grow psychologically dependent on the signal, mentally conditioned to believe that they need Batman to survive. This dependency is psychologically toxic, as it reinforces the perception that the only way to restore order to Gotham is through Batman's direct intervention. Over time, Gotham's people begin to internalize this idea, allowing the cycle to continue indefinitely. They are not only conditioned to expect Batman's intervention, but are also conditioned to believe that no one else can protect them. Gotham becomes a city where hope and dependence are intertwined with the appearance of the bat signal, creating a society that is psychologically incapable of functioning independently. In essence, the bat signal is not just a tool for Batman's action, it is a symbolic trigger that reinforces Gotham's dependency on external intervention, both from the criminals and the people. The bat signal's cyclical influence perpetuates the very problems it seeks to address. Each time it flashes in the sky, Gotham is reminded that it is unable to protect itself. The signal is not a sign of hope, but a manifestation of Gotham's failure to address its systemic issues, its social inequalities, and its inability to create a society that functions without Batman's vigilant intervention. The bat signal in its simplest form is a catalyst for the ongoing struggle, reinforcing both the dependence on Batman and the continuing cycle of crime that makes Gotham perpetually unstable. The bat signal, a seemingly simple tool used to summon Batman, is not just a call for help, it is a symbol of Gotham's moral dilemma. The signal, as an icon, is deeply tied to Batman's approach to justice, which is often questioned for its ethical foundations. Batman, in his quest to protect Gotham, operates outside the law, dispensing justice in ways that bypass the legal system and ignore due process. While his actions may bring temporary order to the city, they raise a significant ethical question. Is Batman truly acting justly, or is he simply reinforcing a system that relies on the unchecked power of a single individual? The bat signal, in this context, represents more than just a call for intervention. It represents the moral ambiguity of Batman's role as a vigilante. Batman's brand of justice is often portrayed as absolute. He believes that there are clear lines between right and wrong, and that his methods, however extreme, are justified by the ends they achieve. However, this form of justice, symbolized by the bat signal, raises a number of moral concerns. Firstly, Batman's methods are rooted in fear, coercion, and physical force, tools that are diametrically opposed to the ideals of fairness and equality that underpin most modern legal systems. Batman's refusal to kill criminals is a moral principle, yet it is often contradicted by his use of extreme violence to incapacitate them. The bat signal, then, is a manifestation of Batman's moral absolutism, a beacon that signals Batman's willingness to impose his vision of justice, regardless of the collateral damage it may cause to the broader moral fabric of Gotham. This brings us to the larger question of whether Gotham truly benefits from Batman's actions. The bat signal, flashing in the sky, may seem like a beacon of hope for the citizens of Gotham, a symbol that justice is being done. But is this really justice? Batman's actions may be effective in controlling crime in the short term, but they do not address the root causes of Gotham's problems, such as corruption, poverty, and inequality. The systemic failures that underlie Gotham's criminal activity are never truly addressed by Batman's interventions. Instead, his actions serve to maintain the status quo, preventing the city from ever achieving true social reform. The bat signal thus represents a moral paradox. It symbolizes the city's dependence on an external force, one that can never offer a long-term solution. Gotham, through its reliance on Batman, is perpetually trapped in a cycle of crisis, unable to move beyond the illusion of safety that the bat signal creates. From a philosophical perspective, Batman's interventions raise profound questions about the nature of justice and morality. In a world governed by the rule of law, justice is typically defined by due process, the idea that individuals should be judged fairly and according to the laws of society. However, Batman's approach to justice is not based on due process, but on personal judgment. His belief in moral absolutism means that he decides who is guilty and what punishment they deserve, without any form of accountability or oversight. This creates a situation where justice is subjective, defined by Batman's personal code rather than a fair and impartial system. The bat signal, in this sense, becomes a symbol of authoritarian justice. A system where power is concentrated in the hands of one individual who is unaccountable to the society he is meant to protect. While Batman may act with the best of intentions, his methods and the bat signal's role in perpetuating them raise a critical question. Can justice truly exist in a society where one person is allowed to impose their vision of right and wrong without oversight or checks on their power? Batman's actions are often justified by the fact that Gotham's legal system is broken, but this does not absolve him of the responsibility that comes with wielding such unilateral power. The bat signal, in this context, is not just a tool of justice. It is a tool of control, a means of keeping Gotham in a state of dependency, and a reminder that the city cannot function without Batman's presence. There is also an existential question at play here. What does it mean to be a hero, and what is the true cost of heroism? Batman, despite his noble intentions, has built a self-destructive identity around his role as Gotham's savior. His reliance on the bat signal to define his purpose means that he is constantly responding to external crises, never able to create a world where the need for Batman is diminished. The bat signal serves as a symbol of Batman's failure, his inability to move beyond the cycle of crime and violence that plagues Gotham. Each time the signal is flashed, it represents the continuation of Gotham's crisis, and by extension, Batman's failure to build a better, more self-sustaining society. Batman's heroism, despite the admiration he receives, is ultimately a asterisk reflection of Gotham's inability to heal itself, trapped in the belief that it needs Batman to survive. In this way, the bat signal symbolizes not just Batman's intervention, but the perpetuation of Gotham's dependency, preventing the city from ever confronting its own moral and existential crisis. Furthermore, there is the question of Batman's own personal redemption. Can Batman truly redeem himself as long as he remains trapped in the role of Gotham's savior? His reliance on the bat signal for intervention prevents him from ever addressing the underlying psychological trauma that fuels his mission. Each time the signal appears, it pulls Batman further into his cycle of guilt, fear, and self-punishment. His war on crime becomes less about justice and more about atonement, a way to repay a debt that he can never truly settle. The bat signal, as a tool that constantly calls Batman to action, perpetuates the cycle of his own self-doubt and sacrifice, leaving him unable to move beyond his trauma or build a life outside of Gotham's constant state of crisis. The bat signal, as a central aspect of Batman's ongoing vigilante mission, exerts a profound psychological toll on Batman himself. Batman's identity is in many ways bound to the bat signal. It is the external symbol that reinforces his purpose and role in Gotham. Every time the bat signal lights up the sky, it reminds Batman of his responsibility to Gotham, pulling him back into the fight against crime and the endless cycle of violence and retribution. However, this reliance on the bat signal is not without its consequences. Over time, the signal becomes more than just a symbol of Gotham's needs. It becomes a symbol of Batman's own emotional imprisonment. Batman's entire identity is rooted in the trauma he suffered as a child, when he witnessed the brutal murder of his parents. This trauma, rather than being dealt with and healed, is continuously reopened with each flashing of the bat signal. Each time the signal appears, Batman is reminded of his past, of the loss that has shaped him and motivated his mission. The bat signal, in this sense, is not just a symbol of Gotham's need for justice. It is a trigger for Batman's deep-seated guilt and grief. His identity as Batman is built on the belief that he is atoning for the deaths of his parents, that he must sacrifice himself in order to right the wrongs of the past. The more the signal flashes, the more Batman is drawn into a perpetual cycle of self-punishment, his actions driven not by the desire for justice, but by a desperate need to redeem himself for an event that he can never undo. The psychological toll of this cycle is significant. Batman is not just physically exhausted by his constant battles against Gotham's criminals. He is emotionally and mentally drained by the never-ending cycle of crime and intervention that the bat signal symbolizes. Each time the signal appears, Batman is pulled back into the mindset of a man who can never rest, who is never allowed to heal, because Gotham's crises never end. Batman's obsession with maintaining order and protecting Gotham's citizens comes at the cost of his own well-being, as he is unable to step away from the mission that has defined him. The bat signal, in essence, serves as a constant reminder that Batman is trapped in his own role, unable to move forward or change. The more he answers its call, the more deeply entrenched he becomes in the very trauma he has been trying to overcome. This dependence on the bat signal also reinforces Batman's emotional isolation. His role as Gotham's protector is one that he chooses to take on alone, refusing to allow anyone to share the burden of his mission. His relationship with his allies, such as Alfred, Commissioner Gordon, and Robin, is often characterized by his distance and reluctance to engage emotionally. Batman's refusal to trust others and his desire to work alone are manifestations of his belief that he is the only one capable of saving Gotham. This isolation is not just a psychological choice, it is a defense mechanism. Batman cannot allow himself to become too close to anyone, because to do so would mean confronting his own vulnerability, a vulnerability that he has spent years suppressing. The bat signal, by consistently calling him into action, reinforces this solitary role that Batman has crafted for himself. Each time he answers the signal, he is pulled deeper into the belief that he is the only one who can protect Gotham, and that he must sacrifice himself for the city's survival. This reinforces the emotional wall he has built around himself, preventing him from forming meaningful relationships or allowing himself to heal. Batman's psychological entrapment is also linked to the illusion of control that the bat signal creates. On the surface, Batman is the protector of Gotham, responding to crises and maintaining order in a city that seems to spiral out of control. However, this reliance on the bat signal for action suggests that Batman is not truly in control. He is in fact being controlled by the very system that he seeks to protect. The signal acts as a constant trigger, forcing Batman into action and preventing him from stepping away from his role as Gotham's savior. Batman, in his desire to impose order and control Gotham, becomes enslaved by the very symbol that represents his power. The more the signal flashes, the more Batman is bound to his mission, unable to break free from the cycle of crime and intervention that defines his existence. This sense of loss of control creates a psychological burden for Batman, who, despite his seemingly unlimited power, is always responding to the needs of others rather than shaping his own destiny. In this way, the bat signal contributes to Batman's internal struggle by reinforcing his identity as a vigilante and savior, while simultaneously trapping him in a cycle of self-punishment and emotional isolation. Each time the signal lights up, Batman is reminded of his inability to escape the trauma and guilt that drive his mission. The signal, far from being a symbol of hope, becomes a psychological cage, one that keeps Batman tethered to a past that he cannot change and a future that he cannot control. Batman's dependence on the bat signal reflects his inability to heal as he continues to sacrifice his own well-being for a mission that cannot offer closure. The bat signal is not just a tool for summoning Batman. It is a symbolic reflection of Gotham's deep-seated dysfunction. Over time, this symbol has come to represent a culture of dependency that permeates every aspect of the city. Gotham's population, as well as its criminal elements and law enforcement, come to rely on Batman's interventions to restore order, rather than actively working towards systemic reforms that could address the root causes of the city's problems. In this way, the bat signal becomes a self-sustaining system that encourages passivity, complacency, and stagnation. For Gotham's citizens, the bat signal symbolizes safety, but it also signifies the continuation of Gotham's inability to function without Batman. Each time the signal appears, it is a reminder that the city's institutions, such as the police force, the judicial system, and the local government, are either incapable or unwilling to address the systemic issues of corruption, poverty, and crime. The bat signal, rather than encouraging civic engagement or the development of effective public policies, reinforces the idea that only Batman can save Gotham from its own decay. This undermines the citizens' agency, leaving them emotionally and psychologically dependent on Batman's constant presence. Over time, this dependency becomes institutionalized, where the expectation is that Gotham's social problems will be resolved externally by Batman rather than through grassroots efforts, policy change, or institutional reform. Gotham's political and social institutions, rather than evolving to meet the needs of the people, become complicit in this system of dependency, reinforcing the notion that real solutions can only come from an outside force. This dependency is particularly pronounced within Gotham's criminal underworld. The bat signal creates a psychological environment where criminals are not only fearful of Batman's intervention, but also dependent on him to maintain the tension and chaos in the city. The constant escalation of crime, driven in part by the psychological dynamics that the bat signal instills, keeps the city in a perpetual state of conflict. Gotham's criminals, like its citizens, have come to expect Batman's intervention, and this expectation drives their behaviors and motivations. Criminals, knowing that their actions will inevitably lead to Batman's involvement, continue to push the boundaries of crime and lawlessness, not because they want to defeat him, but because the cycle of engagement is too deeply ingrained to escape. The bat signal thus not only reinforces the city's dependence on Batman, but it also perpetuates the tension between Gotham's criminals and Batman. This tension, though it may create moments of temporary order, fails to address the deeper systemic issues that allow crime to thrive in the first place. Moreover, the bat signal's influence on Gotham's law enforcement, specifically the Gotham City Police Department, GCPD, reveals a fundamental flaw in the city's approach to justice. Over time, the GCPD becomes increasingly reliant on Batman to handle the more dangerous elements of Gotham's criminal class. This reliance diminishes the moral responsibility and efficacy of the police force. While the GCPD remains the city's primary law enforcement body, the involvement of Batman, symbolized by the bat signal, leads to a reduction in the police department's autonomy and accountability. As the GCPD repeatedly defers to Batman, it becomes a system of codependent law enforcement where the police no longer feel the need to actively confront the city's problems. Instead, they rely on Batman's vigilante justice to fill the gaps. This dynamic disempowers the police force and places the responsibility for justice in the hands of one man, undermining the very concept of a functioning democratic justice system. The moral and ethical erosion of the GCPD, as a result of their constant reliance on Batman, contributes to the degradation of the rule of law in Gotham. This erosion is not only psychological, but also institutional. Gotham's political leaders, who should be addressing the city's structural issues, become increasingly disconnected from the people they are meant to serve. With Batman assuming the role of Gotham's ultimate protector, politicians and government officials are free from accountability for the city's ongoing problems. The bat signal, in this context, represents the failure of Gotham's government to take responsibility for the city's future. Gotham's political system, in turn, becomes complicit in maintaining the status quo, as it subverts any real attempts at social or governmental reform. The bat signal thus becomes a symbol of political dysfunction, perpetuating a system where the people's needs are secondary to the perceived effectiveness of Batman. Ultimately, the bat signal becomes a cultural touchstone for Gotham, a symbol that is imprinted in the minds of its citizens. Over time, Gotham's people begin to view the bat signal not just as a tool for calling Batman into action, but as a symbol of the city's core identity. Gotham becomes defined not by its strengths or resilience, but by its constant need for Batman. The psychological impact of this symbolic dependence results in a cultural stagnation, where Gotham's residents are unable to imagine a future where they can solve their own problems. The bat signal, flashing across the sky, tells them that they do not have to change. They can continue to rely on Batman to fix the issues in the city, as long as the signal is there to reassure them. The psychological attachment to the bat signal reinforces a passive citizenry, one that is mentally conditioned to wait for Batman to solve the city's problems, rather than taking ownership of their future. This psychological attachment to Batman becomes so ingrained in the cultural fabric of Gotham that any attempts at true reform seem impossible. Gotham's social systems, its justice system, police force, and political institutions have become subordinate to Batman, and the bat signal remains the key symbol that upholds this system. Gotham's cultural evolution is frozen in this dynamic, and the city becomes trapped in an endless cycle of waiting for intervention rather than creating solutions from within. At the heart of the bat signal's influence lies its ability to shape Gotham's perception of heroism. Batman, as a figure who operates outside the law, represents a radical form of justice that is in many ways opposed to traditional notions of due process and democratic governance. The bat signal, by calling Batman into action, reinforces the idea that justice is external, something that can only be achieved by a singular hero, rather than by a collective effort through the established systems of law and order. Over time, Gotham's citizens come to rely not on the legal system or institutions of power, but on Batman's personal intervention. This personalized form of justice is seductive. Batman is seen as a hero who fights for what is right, but his methods and the bat signal that symbolizes his presence oversimplify the concept of morality. Gotham's citizens begin to view justice not as a system that can be systemically reformed, but as something that can be enforced by one man. The signal serves as a constant reminder that Batman alone can define and enforce justice. It creates a binary system in which Batman stands for good, and the criminals who challenge him are evil. This view, while easy to digest, undermines the complexity of justice, reducing it to a simple dichotomy of right and wrong. In the real world, justice is rarely so black and white, but Gotham, through its reliance on the bat signal, comes to believe that there is only one way to restore order: through Batman's violent interventions. The bat signal thus represents a distorted view of justice, where right and wrong are defined not by laws or ethical principles, but by Batman's personal, often brutal, sense of morality. This creates a situation where the true meaning of justice, as something collaborative, deliberative, and systemic, is lost in favor of an individualistic, authoritarian approach. Furthermore, the bat signal's influence on Gotham's perception of heroism is equally problematic. Over time, Batman becomes the quintessential hero, a symbol of self-sacrifice, courage, and unwavering moral righteousness. However, this image is flawed. Batman's heroism is defined by his willingness to go to extremes, often crossing moral and legal boundaries in pursuit of his goals. While he may save Gotham time and time again, Batman's reliance on fear, violence, and intimidation undermines the very ideals of heroism that he represents. The bat signal, as the symbol of his intervention, becomes a tool of psychological manipulation that reinforces the idea that true heroes operate outside of the law and beyond reproach. Batman, as the hero Gotham looks up to, sets an example that is ultimately dangerous. His willingness to engage in acts of violence in the name of justice distorts the public's understanding of what it means to be a true hero. The bat signal in this context is not just a signal for help, it is a symbol of the skewed ideals of heroism and justice that Gotham has come to embrace. Gotham's citizens begin to believe that heroism is a solitary endeavor, one that requires an individual to make personal sacrifices without the need for collaboration, institutional backing, or moral questioning. The bat signal thus reinforces the idea that the ends justify the means, a philosophy that can have dangerous consequences for the city's future. The bat signal also plays a crucial role in shaping Gotham's moral responsibility. By relying on Batman to solve its problems, Gotham's citizens come to believe that their moral responsibility is secondary to Batman's intervention. Gotham's residents, criminals, and law enforcement officers alike look to Batman to set the moral standard and make decisions about justice and punishment. This outsourcing of moral responsibility leads to a moral erosion in the city. Gotham's citizens begin to accept that Batman is the moral compass for the city, and they no longer feel the need to actively engage with the issues facing their society. The bat signal, by reminding Gotham of its dependence on Batman, encourages a culture where people believe that Batman is the only one who can solve their problems, and they have no role to play in addressing the underlying issues in the city. As a result, Gotham becomes a passive society where the moral agency of its people is surrendered to Batman. This lack of collective moral responsibility makes it easier for Gotham's criminal elements to thrive, knowing that Batman will eventually intervene to restore order. It also leaves Gotham's institutions of power, the police force, the political system, and the judicial system, largely impotent, as they no longer feel the need to act independently in the face of Gotham's problems. The bat signal, in this way, serves as a reinforcing tool that saps the moral agency of Gotham's population, leaving them psychologically dependent on Batman's personal judgment of right and wrong. The ethical implications of this outsourcing of justice are far-reaching. The bat signal, by reinforcing the idea that Batman is the ultimate moral authority, diminishes the role of Gotham's laws and institutions in shaping the city's ethical landscape. Gotham becomes a city where the law is no longer the primary mechanism for enforcing justice. Instead, justice is subjective, defined by Batman's personal code. This creates a moral vacuum in which Gotham's citizens no longer feel obligated to contribute to the betterment of their society. Instead, they look to Batman as the moral agent who will deliver justice, leaving them free from the burden of personal moral responsibility. This ethical dependence is dangerous, as it prevents Gotham from ever truly confronting the systemic issues that perpetuate crime, corruption, and inequality. The bat signal serves as a psychological reminder that Gotham can never change without Batman's intervention, paralyzing the city's ability to create its own moral framework. The bat signal, a seemingly simple symbol of action, has an insidious impact on the social and psychological landscape of Gotham. Over time, its presence, flashing in the sky whenever Gotham faces a crisis, serves not just as a signal for Batman, but as a powerful reminder that Gotham is a city in constant turmoil. This perpetual state of crisis becomes the foundation of Gotham's identity. Every time the bat signal lights up, Gotham is reminded that it is a city incapable of sustaining itself, where solutions to social ills, crime, and corruption can only come from the intervention of an outside force. The bat signal, in this regard, locks Gotham into a cycle of dependency. The city cannot move forward or develop its own systems of justice or peace because it is conditioned to wait for Batman's help. Gotham's citizens are led to believe that their resilience is irrelevant, as Batman is the one who will always solve the problem, despite the fact that his interventions only address symptoms, not causes. This psychological framework profoundly undermines Gotham's self-determination. The very existence of the bat signal reinforces the belief that the city is incapable of change or self-sufficiency. Gotham, as a collective society, comes to view itself as unable to protect its own citizens or solve its own problems without Batman's intervention. This mentality stunts the city's growth by creating a passive citizenry that believes they have no role to play in the resolution of Gotham's issues. Instead of demanding systemic change from their political leaders or law enforcement, they have been conditioned to wait for Batman, the hero who, despite his good intentions, perpetuates the very dysfunction he seeks to alleviate. This learned helplessness spreads throughout Gotham's populace, making it psychologically difficult for the citizens to break free from the constant cycle of crisis and dependence on Batman. The bat signal, then, serves as a tool of perpetual stagnation, reinforcing Gotham's identity as a city that cannot heal itself, and encouraging the public to passively wait for someone else to fix their problems. What is even more tragic about this cycle is that it keeps Gotham from developing its own resilience. In a healthy society, collective action, community building, and self-reliance are key to creating lasting solutions to societal problems. However, the bat signal robs Gotham of these qualities. By continually looking to Batman as their savior, Gotham's citizens fail to develop their own capacity to address issues like poverty, corruption, and crime. Gotham's government, law enforcement, and social institutions also become complicit in this dynamic. The GCPD, instead of becoming more effective in policing the streets or reforming their methods, relies on Batman to handle the most dangerous criminals. The political system, rather than investing in long-term reforms, feels no pressure to act because the city believes that Batman will always step in when necessary. In essence, the bat signal causes Gotham's institutions to stagnate as they become dependent on the unpredictable intervention of an outside force. Batman, rather than developing their own systematic solutions to the problems they face. This failure of institutional self-reliance is one of the key consequences of the bat signal. Gotham, as a city, has never been empowered to face its own demons. Its government, legal system, and police force have been unable to take control of the situation because Batman's interventions always keep them in a position of passive observers. Gotham's institutional decay is a direct result of this failure to take responsibility for its own future. Rather than engaging in proactive solutions, Gotham is stuck in a cycle where Batman acts when the crisis is too great, but the underlying issues are never addressed. The bat signal, as a constant trigger for action, prevents the people of Gotham from asking the hard questions. Why is Gotham perpetually in crisis? What can be done to fix the systemic problems that allow crime and corruption to thrive? These are questions that are never answered, because the signal of Batman's arrival offers a quick and temporary fix, making it easier for Gotham to ignore the need for structural change. This psychological loop has devastating effects on Gotham's potential for long-term transformation. Rather than building a resilient society that can address its issues without external help, Gotham continues to exist as a perpetual victim of its own dysfunction. The bat signal locks Gotham into this cycle by reminding its citizens, its police, and its criminals that external intervention is always the answer. This stifles creative solutions, grassroots movements, and community-based efforts to reform Gotham's criminal justice system, education system, and political governance. The result is a city that is psychologically and institutionally stuck, unable to evolve or break free from the cycle of crime, corruption, and dependence. Moreover, the moral consequences of Gotham's continued dependence on Batman are significant. By relying on one individual, one vigilante, to define justice and restore order, Gotham abandons the core principles of a functioning society: collaboration, due process, and shared responsibility. Batman, as a figure operating outside the law, represents a moral absolutism that undermines the democratic values that Gotham's institutions are supposed to uphold. The bat signal, as a tool to summon Batman into action, reinforces the idea that justice can only be enforced by one man, rather than by a system that is responsive to the needs of the people. This distortion of justice creates an environment where individual freedom is constantly compromised in favor of Batman's authoritarian style of order. Gotham's reliance on Batman as their sole moral enforcer diminishes the value of collective action and the need for societal reform. The bat signal's flashing light becomes a symbol of moral decay, not of hope. What Gotham ultimately needs is not just Batman's intervention, but a reawakening, a shift in mindset that empowers its citizens, its government, and its law enforcement to take responsibility for the city's future. The bat signal, while it may offer temporary relief, represents the false hope that external intervention can solve Gotham's problems. It is a psychological crutch that keeps the city from building the resilience it needs to tackle the deep-rooted issues that prevent real social progress. Gotham, as it currently stands, is psychologically conditioned to wait for Batman to save them rather than taking ownership of their own fate. The long-term cultural consequences of this dependency are profound. Gotham is locked in a perpetual cycle of crisis, unable to evolve or transcend its dysfunction without the intervention of a figure who in the end is just as flawed and trapped by the system as the city he seeks to protect. The bat signal, as a beacon of Gotham's dependence on Batman, does more than just summon the vigilante. It serves as a constant reminder of Batman's emotional entrapment. Each time the signal flashes, it pulls him deeper into the psychological prison of his own creation, reinforcing his role as Gotham's savior and leaving him emotionally tethered to the city's crises. For Batman, the bat signal becomes both a calling and a curse, a representation of the unresolved trauma that drives him, and a reminder that he is forever locked in an emotional struggle that he cannot escape. Batman's existence is defined by his obsession with justice, but the bat signal represents a feedback loop that forces him to respond to the chaos in Gotham, without ever being able to address the root causes of that chaos or confront his own inner turmoil. Each time the signal illuminates the sky, it reinforces the idea that Batman's purpose is inextricably tied to Gotham's need for constant protection. This external dependence prevents Batman from developing a true sense of self-worth. He begins to define his value not by his personal growth, but by his ability to react to Gotham's crises. His identity, which is already shaped by the trauma of losing his parents, becomes more entrenched in the belief that his self-worth is reliant on his usefulness to the city. The bat signal reinforces this belief, constantly calling him into action, reminding him that Gotham cannot survive without him. This creates a toxic cycle, where Batman's sense of self-worth becomes intertwined with the city's perpetual need for his intervention. He is no longer an individual seeking justice for his personal pain, but a symbol of Gotham's failure to heal itself. This cycle of intervention also prevents Batman from addressing his own emotional needs. While the bat signal calls him into action, it simultaneously keeps him from confronting his own trauma. The death of his parents, the loss of his childhood, and the deep emotional scars that Batman carries are never fully dealt with, because the bat signal constantly pulls him away from the possibility of personal healing. Every time the signal flashes, it signifies another emotional wound that Batman is unable to process, and each intervention is another opportunity for him to avoid dealing with his past. Batman's inability to heal is rooted in the fact that his mission is defined by external chaos rather than internal resolution. The bat signal, therefore, becomes a symbol of Batman's emotional avoidance, a mechanism that keeps him focused on Gotham's problems rather than on his own psychological healing. Moreover, the psychological toll on Batman's emotional health is not limited to his inability to confront his trauma. It also stems from the relentless pressure of his heroic role. Each time the bat signal flashes, Batman is reminded that he is Gotham's only hope, and this constant responsibility becomes a burden that weighs on his mental stability. The pressure of constantly being needed by Gotham leaves Batman emotionally isolated, as he cannot afford to build relationships or engage with the world outside of his mission. The bat signal reinforces the idea that Batman must be alone, and that his self-worth is tied to his isolation. This creates a vicious cycle where Batman, despite his desire for human connection, is forced to distance himself from others in order to maintain his role as Gotham's protector. The sacrifice of relationships, coupled with the emotional weight of his mission, leaves Batman in a state of profound loneliness, a mental toll that further deepens his emotional wounds. Batman's emotional isolation is also exacerbated by the disconnect between his public persona as Gotham's hero and his private self. The bat signal symbolizes Batman's public identity, a figure of justice and heroism who stands above the law and serves as Gotham's savior. However, this public role only deepens Batman's sense of alienation as it keeps him from being able to acknowledge his true self. As the bat signal illuminates the sky, it reflects a public image of Batman that is disconnected from his private human side. The more Gotham relies on Batman to solve its problems, the more Batman becomes an abstraction, a symbol of hope, rather than an individual with emotional needs and personal struggles. The bat signal, in this way, reinforces the dual nature of Batman's existence. He is a man, but the world sees him as a symbol. This duality creates psychological tension, as Batman is forced to play the role of a hero while never being able to fully embrace his humanity. This disconnect between public heroism and private pain is a central theme in Batman's psychological journey. The bat signal, by constantly pulling him into action, reinforces this split identity, keeping Batman locked in a role where he cannot evolve beyond the trauma that defines him. His emotional growth is stunted by the constant need to act as Gotham's protector. Each time the bat signal flashes, it is a reminder that Batman's true self is not allowed to emerge. The cycle of intervention becomes a defense mechanism, one that keeps Batman from confronting his own vulnerability, emotions, and desires. The bat signal, in this sense, is not just a call for justice, it is a tool of psychological suppression, keeping Batman in a perpetual state of action, never allowing him the time or space to heal. Batman's reliance on the bat signal also prevents him from seeking help. Throughout his journey, Batman consistently refuses to accept outside support, either from Alfred, Gordon, or any of his other allies. He isolates himself emotionally, believing that his mission is too important to share. The bat signal serves as a constant reminder that Batman must act alone, reinforcing the belief that he is the only one who can fix Gotham. This sense of moral superiority, combined with the psychological isolation that the bat signal perpetuates, leaves Batman emotionally trapped. He is constantly called to action, but never allowed to confront his own inner turmoil, leading to a psychological burden that only grows heavier over time. The bat signal is often perceived by Gotham's citizens as a symbol of hope, a beacon that signifies Batman's arrival to restore order in times of crisis. Yet, while it appears to offer a glimmer of hope in Gotham's darkest moments, the bat signal's true psychological function is far more complex and manipulative. Rather than being a simple call for help, the bat signal serves as a tool for psychological conditioning, keeping Gotham's citizens in a perpetual state of dependence on Batman. It creates a false sense of security, leading the population to believe that Batman alone is capable of addressing the city's issues, reinforcing their reliance on an external figure rather than empowering them to take responsibility for their own lives and communities. The bat signal, in this sense, manipulates hope by shaping the narrative of Gotham's future. Gotham's citizens come to see the signal as an assurance that, no matter how dire the circumstances, Batman will always be there to save them. However, this sense of hope is ultimately disempowering. The signal reinforces the idea that Gotham's problems cannot be solved by its citizens or institutions. They can only be addressed by an external force. This external force, symbolized by the bat signal, becomes the sole provider of justice in Gotham. Over time, this idea of hope becomes rooted in dependency. The population's hope for a better future is tied not to the possibility of social reform or community action, but to the imminent intervention of Batman. This false hope perpetuates the illusion of safety and control. Gotham's citizens are psychologically conditioned to believe that they are safe as long as the bat signal is there, overshadowing the underlying instability of the city. Every time the signal shines in the sky, it serves as a reminder that Batman is watching, but it also reinforces the idea that only Batman can fix Gotham. This constant reassurance creates a psychological environment where Gotham's population feels protected without ever having to confront the real causes of their city's problems. It is a cognitive dissonance that allows them to accept the status quo of crime, corruption, and inequality, believing that Batman will restore order and prevent the city from completely collapsing. However, this illusion of safety is superficial. Gotham's deep-rooted issues are never truly addressed, and the bat signal, rather than leading to real change, becomes a tool that masks the city's systemic failures. The bat signal, as a symbol of Batman's omnipresence, also reinforces the idea that Batman is indispensable to Gotham's survival. This creates a paradox. While the signal is meant to inspire hope, it actually ensures that Gotham remains dependent on Batman. Gotham becomes a city that cannot function without him, psychologically trapped in the belief that only Batman can maintain order. Over time, this dependence becomes ingrained in the collective consciousness of Gotham. Citizens, law enforcement, and even politicians begin to see Batman's presence as essential to the city's well-being, disempowering them from ever taking meaningful action themselves. The more Gotham depends on the bat signal, the less it is able to take ownership of its own future, creating a vicious cycle of reliance and passivity. This, in turn, locks Gotham into a state of perpetual crisis, where the illusion of hope provided by the bat signal prevents the city from realizing its own potential for reform. On the level of psychological manipulation, the bat signal is particularly effective because it taps into a universal need for reassurance and security. In times of crisis, the human instinct is to seek out a protector, a figure who can restore order and calm. Batman, through the bat signal, fills this role for Gotham, offering an image of strength and control. However, the bat signal's manipulation goes beyond just providing psychological comfort. It keeps Gotham's citizens from engaging with their own agency. They are conditioned to wait for Batman's intervention rather than taking proactive steps to solve the city's problems themselves. This reliance on Batman for reassurance feeds into the idea that Gotham cannot survive without him, reinforcing the belief that Gotham's survival is dependent on external intervention rather than internal change. Furthermore, the bat signal's role in maintaining Gotham's psychological state is not just about hope, it is about perpetuating fear. The symbol of Batman's arrival can be comforting in times of danger, but it also reinforces the idea that Gotham is constantly on the edge of collapse, always one step away from chaos. The bat signal is not just a symbol of hope, it is also a symbol of Gotham's fragility. It tells Gotham's citizens that the city is always on the verge of destruction, and only Batman can prevent that destruction. This constant state of anxiety and anticipation keeps Gotham trapped in a cycle of fear and dependence, where the hope for salvation is always tied to the imminent arrival of Batman. The more the bat signal is used, the more Gotham becomes psychologically tethered to the idea that it is incapable of surviving on its own. This dynamic is dangerous because it prevents Gotham from healing. By reinforcing the belief that Batman is the solution to all of Gotham's problems, the bat signal discourages the development of long-term strategies or sustainable reforms. Gotham's focus is always on the immediate crisis, rather than on the structural changes needed to address the root causes of its social issues. The illusion of control, symbolized by the bat signal, undermines the city's potential for genuine transformation. Instead of empowering Gotham's residents and institutions to confront and solve their problems, the signal fosters a culture of reliance on external solutions, leaving the city stuck in a perpetual state of crisis and recovery, never able to move beyond its dependence on Batman. The bat signal, by summoning Batman to action, plays a critical role in reinforcing Gotham's authoritarian structure. While Batman may not formally hold any position of power in Gotham's government, his ability to enforce justice through fear and violence places him in a unique position of power. The bat signal becomes a symbol not just of protection or hope, but of control. Batman, as the ultimate arbiter of justice, operates outside the established legal systems of Gotham, bypassing the checks and balances that define democratic societies. This creates a dangerous precedent where Gotham's system of justice is not determined by lawmakers or judges, but by one individual's personal moral code. The bat signal as a tool for summoning Batman reinforces the idea that justice in Gotham is not democratically determined, but is imposed by the unilateral authority of Batman. This arrangement reflects a fundamental flaw in Gotham's system of governance. Gotham's institutions, such as its police force, its courts, and its political system, are meant to represent the collective will of the people and ensure that justice is administered impartially. However, the bat signal symbolizes the failure of these institutions to maintain order or deliver justice. When the bat signal flashes across the sky, it sends a clear message: Gotham's citizens cannot trust their own legal system to uphold justice. They must rely on Batman, a figure who operates outside the law. In this way, The bat signal becomes a symbol of institutional failure, a city that cannot function without Batman's intervention. Gotham's dependency on Batman not only undermines the legitimacy of its legal institutions, but also legitimizes the idea that one individual can take control of justice, bypassing democratic processes and due process in the name of expedience. In terms of political philosophy, the bat signal reflects a shift from democracy and rule of law to rule by fear. While Batman may argue that his actions are justified by the need to protect Gotham from criminals, his methods often involve intimidation, violence, and coercion, tools that are characteristic of authoritarian regimes. The bat signal, as a call for Batman's intervention, encourages the public acceptance of these methods as a legitimate form of justice. Over time, the symbol of Batman becomes associated with the idea of justice in Gotham, but this justice is imposed from above, rather than being collaboratively determined by the people. The bat signal, in this sense, reinforces authoritarianism, making Gotham's population increasingly dependent on Batman's unilateral power. This psychological dependence on Batman to restore order keeps the city from developing a truly democratic system where citizens can collectively take responsibility for reforming their society. The bat signal also represents the undermining of due process, a cornerstone of democratic societies. Due process, by definition, ensures that individuals are treated fairly under the law, and that justice is administered impartially through established legal frameworks. However, Batman's actions, symbolized by the bat signal, bypass due process by making him the sole judge, jury, and executioner. The signal becomes a symbol of vigilantism, where justice is not determined by impartial courts, but by the subjective moral code of Batman. This system of justice, while it may bring immediate results in terms of punishing criminals, is inherently undemocratic because it removes the public oversight and accountability that are central to a functioning democracy. The use of the bat signal reinforces the idea that individuals can take the law into their own hands, and that Batman's personal judgment supersedes the established legal processes. By perpetuating the idea that Gotham cannot function without Batman, the bat signal also reinforces the myth of the lone hero. Batman's intervention is symbolic of the heroic individual who steps in to fix what is broken, with little regard for the institutional structures that should be in place. This dynamic glorifies the idea of individualism over collective action, where Batman is seen as the ultimate solution to Gotham's problems. Gotham's citizens begin to believe that only Batman can bring order to the city, and this belief keeps them from demanding reforms to the systemic flaws that underlie Gotham's ongoing struggles with crime and corruption. The bat signal, as a symbol of Batman's omnipresence, ultimately reinforces the idea that justice cannot be achieved through collaboration or reform, but must always be enforced through individual action, in this case Batman's violent and unilateral decisions. The philosophical implications of the bat signal's role in Gotham's justice system are profound. The signal represents a rejection of collective responsibility, replacing it with a hierarchical system in which one individual, Batman, holds the power to decide what is just and what is not. This system not only undermines the idea of democratic justice, but also perpetuates the belief that order and control can only be maintained through fear and violence. The bat signal, flashing in the sky, symbolizes Gotham's inability to address its own systemic issues and its reliance on Batman to provide solutions to its problems. By encouraging this dynamic, the bat signal serves as a tool of manipulation, perpetuating the idea that only Batman can bring justice to Gotham and that no one else is capable of doing so. This has long-term consequences for Gotham's political health, as it prevents the city from developing a truly democratic system that can address its problems from within. The bat signal, over the years, has become indelibly linked to Gotham's identity. It is more than just a call to action for Batman. It is a symbol of Gotham's unresolved issues, a city forever on the brink of collapse, dependent on the unpredictable intervention of an external force. As Gotham's dependence on Batman grows, the bat signal takes on a more symbolic role, not just a signal for Batman to intervene, but an emblem of the city's deep-seated dysfunction. Each time the signal shines, it is a reminder of Gotham's inability to stand on its own. The signal reflects the status quo, where Batman is seen as the only solution to the city's systemic problems, perpetuating a cycle of crisis that never truly ends. In this way, the bat signal becomes a symbol of stagnation, reinforcing the idea that Gotham can never fully evolve unless Batman continues to play the role of the city's savior. Gotham's citizens, conditioned to rely on the bat signal as a signal of safety and intervention, begin to lose hope that the city's problems can be solved from within. Instead of fostering a sense of empowerment or self-sufficiency, the bat signal reinforces a sense of helplessness, where the population believes that only Batman can bring justice, rather than the city's institutions or its people taking collective responsibility for reform. This psychological dependency on the bat signal prevents Gotham from developing its own solutions to its deep-rooted issues. The bat signal, flashing across the sky, becomes a psychological crutch that stifles any potential for long-term reform or structural change. Gotham's leaders, law enforcement, and citizens may express a desire for justice and peace, but the bat signal suggests that these things can only be achieved through Batman's intervention. The continuous presence of Batman, symbolized by the bat signal, creates the illusion that the status quo is the only possible reality for Gotham, and that the city's problems are too great to be solved without the intervention of an external force. Moreover, the very nature of the bat signal's light, its ephemeral and fleeting quality, reinforces the idea of impermanence in Gotham's hope for salvation. The signal is a brief flash of light in the darkness, but it is never permanent. It calls for action, but the moment Batman responds, the signal fades, only to reappear again when Gotham faces another crisis. This ephemeral quality mirrors Gotham's constant state of crisis, an ongoing cycle where the city never truly stabilizes or resolves its underlying issues. The flickering of the bat signal becomes a metaphor for the city's inability to endure on its own, trapped in a state of constant emergency without ever being able to create lasting solutions. This endless cycle of intervention and crisis perpetuates a false sense of progress in Gotham. Batman's presence, symbolized by the bat signal, may seem to offer hope, but it fails to address the deeper structural issues that lead to Gotham's constant state of instability. Batman's interventions are temporary solutions that mask the problem without ever solving it. The bat signal, in this sense, represents the illusion of justice, the belief that Gotham is being saved, when in fact the real issues are only being masked by Batman's personal crusade. Gotham's deep-seated corruption, its economic inequality, its social decay, and its failing institutions remain unresolved because the bat signal encourages the belief that Batman's intervention is enough. Gotham's leaders, law enforcement, and citizens are lulled into complacency, believing that they do not need to address the root causes of the city's crises as long as Batman is there to protect them. As Gotham's dependency on Batman continues, the legacy of the bat signal becomes a self-reinforcing system of psychological manipulation. Gotham citizens growing up with the bat signal are conditioned to see Batman as the only answer to the city's problems. The city's youth, who come of age under the constant presence of Batman, may begin to believe that true justice and order can only come through the actions of a single individual, Batman. This sets a dangerous precedent for Gotham's future, as it discourages the growth of democratic values, institutional reform, and collective responsibility. The bat signal, as a symbol of external intervention, becomes interwoven into the psychological fabric of Gotham, and its citizens begin to see themselves as passive recipients of justice rather than active participants in the creation of a more just society. The long-term effect of this psychological conditioning is that Gotham's citizens, despite their best intentions, are unable to imagine a future where they can solve their own problems without relying on Batman. The bat signal, rather than being a symbol of hope, ultimately symbolizes Gotham's inability to move beyond its past. The cycle of constant dependence on Batman keeps the city in a state of perpetual crisis, preventing it from ever achieving true social progress. As Gotham citizens look to the sky, waiting for the bat signal to shine, they are reminded that they are trapped in a cycle where Batman alone is the answer, and the city can never truly break free from the darkness that his presence symbolizes. The bat signal's pervasive influence extends beyond Gotham's citizens and criminals. It plays a critical role in shaping the dynamics of Batman's relationships with his allies. At its core, Batman's reliance on the bat signal symbolizes his psychological isolation and emotional distance from those closest to him. The bat signal, flashing in the sky, is more than just a call for Batman to respond to Gotham's crises. It is a constant reminder that Batman operates outside of the system and that no one else can bear the weight of his mission. This reliance on an external force to dictate Batman's actions creates a barrier between him and those who care for him, particularly his allies. One of the most significant figures in Batman's life is Commissioner Gordon. Over the years, Gordon has become one of Batman's most trusted allies, often serving as the primary liaison between the GCPD and Batman. However, despite their strong partnership, the relationship between the two is marked by distance and emotional detachment. The bat signal itself is a symbol of this detachment. When the signal lights up, Gordon is effectively calling on Batman to act, but this call, in its very nature, reflects the fundamental imbalance in their relationship. Gordon is part of the established system, the law enforcement system, yet he is forced to rely on Batman, a figure outside of the law, to deal with the city's most dangerous criminals. The signal serves as a constant reminder that Gotham's systems of justice are flawed and that Batman is the solution to its problems. This dynamic reinforces Gordon's dependence on Batman and contributes to a sense of disempowerment within Gotham's law enforcement. The bat signal also impacts the relationship between Batman and Alfred, his loyal butler and surrogate father. Alfred, despite his deep affection for Bruce Wayne, is often relegated to the role of a supporting figure, one who provides counsel, moral support, and medical care in Batman's most vulnerable moments. However, the psychological manipulation inherent in the bat signal prevents Batman from fully trusting others to share the burden of his mission. Alfred, for all his wisdom and guidance, can only act as a passive observer to Batman's struggle. The bat signal reinforces the distance between them, as Batman's role is defined not by the guidance of trusted allies, but by his personal commitment to the city's protection. Batman's constant need to respond to the bat signal keeps him in a reactive mode, rather than empowering him to work collaboratively with others to bring about lasting change. Alfred's concerns for Bruce's well-being often take a backseat to the immediate demands of Gotham's crises, creating a sense of emotional estrangement despite their familial bond. In the case of Robin, the bat signal's influence takes on an even more complex dimension. Robin, as Batman's sidekick, is often the figure who represents the possibility of mentorship and shared responsibility. However, the bat signal's persistent role in summoning Batman to action creates a barrier to true partnership. Robin, like Gordon and Alfred, is often left in a position where he must wait for Batman to act. This dynamic fosters resentment and frustration in Robin, as he sees Batman becoming more entrenched in his own mission and less willing to share the weight of justice. Robin, despite his own abilities and drive for justice, often feels subjugated to Batman's personal crusade, and the bat signal, in many ways, reinforces this subjugation. Each time the signal shines, Robin is reminded that he is, at best, a secondary figure, and that the weight of Gotham's salvation rests on Batman's shoulders alone. This psychological hierarchy between Batman and Robin leads to an eventual emotional rift, as Robin's desire to assert his own agency and be seen as an equal becomes increasingly difficult under the shadow of Batman's constant reliance on the bat signal. The bat signal, in this sense, becomes a symbol of Batman's isolation. While he may have allies, the very nature of the bat signal reinforces the idea that Batman's mission is his alone. His allies, for all their loyalty and dedication, are forced to wait for his signal before they can act, and their own agency becomes subordinated to the constant need for Batman's intervention. This dynamic creates a psychological barrier that prevents Batman from forming meaningful partnerships or building trusting relationships with those who care for him. The more the bat signal flashes, the more Batman becomes a figure of authority, and the less he becomes a person who can share his burden with others. This creates a fundamental emotional rift between Batman and his allies, one that prevents him from fully engaging with the people who are closest to him and sharing the emotional load of his mission. In many ways, the bat signal acts as a reminder of Batman's inability to fully trust those around him. His need for control and fear of vulnerability keep him emotionally distant from those who could offer him support and companionship. Rather than allowing his allies to become true partners in his mission, Batman sees them as assistants, individuals who help him in his never-ending war on crime, but are never allowed to play an equal role in shaping Gotham's future. The bat signal, flashing overhead, reinforces this division, reminding Batman that he alone is responsible for Gotham's survival. His inability to share the responsibility with others, and his refusal to let go of his role as Gotham's singular hero, ultimately isolates him from the very people who are closest to him. In conclusion, the bat signal is far more than a simple tool for summoning Batman to action. It is a complex symbol that profoundly shapes Gotham's psyche and perpetuates the cycle of dependency, fear, and stagnation within the city. As a symbol of hope, the bat signal gives Gotham's citizens a false sense of security, reinforcing their reliance on Batman as their sole protector and judge of justice. This external intervention traps the city in a perpetual state of crisis, preventing self-reliance and institutional reform. Rather than empowering the citizens of Gotham to address their own problems, the bat signal convinces them that their salvation can only come from an outside force, Batman himself. The bat signal also plays a critical role in shaping Batman's own psychological state. Rather than offering him an opportunity to heal from his past trauma and emotional wounds, it keeps him psychologically trapped in a cycle of intervention, a cycle that defines his sense of self-worth based solely on his ability to react to Gotham's crises. This cycle prevents Batman from ever achieving true emotional growth or self-realization, and it leaves him emotionally isolated from his allies, who are also forced to depend on his constant presence to maintain order in the city. Moreover, the bat signal contributes to the erosion of Gotham's democratic values, as it replaces due process and the rule of law with the unilateral authority of one man, Batman. This system of vigilante justice undermines Gotham's institutions and perpetuates the belief that only Batman can enforce order, leaving the city unable to develop its own systems of accountability and sustainability. The moral and philosophical implications of the bat signal are profound, as it not only manipulates the psychological dependency of Gotham's population, but also solidifies Batman's position as the ultimate arbiter of justice, without the checks and balances that are essential to a functioning society. In the long run, the bat signal is a symbol of Gotham's stagnation, a reminder that the city cannot move forward or evolve beyond its reliance on Batman. It creates a psychological crutch that prevents Gotham from addressing the deeper issues of corruption, inequality, and injustice that plague it. While the signal may offer temporary relief, it never leads to long-term change or reform, and it keeps Gotham psychologically bound to the idea that Batman is the city's only hope. Ultimately, the bat signal represents a psychological manipulation of hope, justice, and heroism. It reinforces Gotham's dependence on Batman, stifling any potential for true self-reliance and reformation. For Batman, the signal serves as a constant reminder of his emotional isolation, his fear of vulnerability, and his unwillingness to move beyond the trauma that defines his mission. Gotham, in turn, becomes a city that cannot escape its past, perpetually looking to the sky for salvation instead of confronting the underlying issues that keep it trapped in a cycle of crisis. In this complex and deeply entrenched system, the bat signal serves as both a call for justice and a symbol of control, one that manipulates the very psyche of Gotham, reinforcing its dependency and emotional paralysis, and preventing the city from ever realizing its true potential for growth, healing, and self-determination.